Our guest today is Jason Tait, who is the Director of Pastoral Care/Designated Safeguarding Lead at a leading independent international school in the UK. In addition to having specific responsibilities for all aspects of pastoral care and safeguarding across the school, Jason has particular interests and expertise in the areas of positive psychology and contextual safeguarding. Jason is also the co-founder and developer of the Student Voice, which is a contextual safeguarding tool that seeks to create brave spaces that empower young voices and inspire society to develop safer communities. Now let's get to the episode.
I'm educational justice coach Lindsay Lyons, and here on the Time for Teachership podcast, we learn how to inspire educational innovation for racial and gender justice, design curricula grounded in student voice, and build capacity for shared leadership. I'm a former teacher leader turned instructional coach. I'm striving to live a life full of learning, running, baking, traveling, and parenting because we can be rockstar educators and be full human beings. If you're a principal, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, instructional coach, or teacher who enjoys nerding out about co-created curriculum with students, I made this show for you. Here we go. Jason Tait, welcome to the Time for Teachership podcast.
Great. Thanks for having me. It's really real pleasure to see you and to talk about what we're going to go through. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm really excited. And I think you bring a really interesting perspective being for primarily United States-based audience, like a external to the US perspective is really, I think, going to help a lot of folks listening. So I'm curious to know, before we actually dive into the main conversation here, what is important for listeners to know about you or just keep in mind about the topic in general before we dive in?
Yeah, so so actually I have quite a good connection with America and the States, although I'm from the UK myself. I work at an American international school, so I'm fairly familiar with the American education system and all the differences of that means compared to the UK system. But because I'm based in the UK, we have a series of statutory requirements that we have to follow in and around the whole area of what the UK would call safeguarding, which essentially means making sure that schools keep young people and children safe, both in school, but also deal with any online issues, and also are responsible for helping them to stay safe in the community and also at home. So there's a fairly extensive framework which is statutory. So it's an English education law that schools are required to do this and look after the children under their care and all that through all their different lived life experiences.
I love that framing for today's conversation, and thank you for defining that for us. I think that'll be really powerful to think about, especially in line with like this next question I usually ask. Dr. Bettina Love talks about freedom dreaming in the following way. She says,
Yeah.
It's dreams grounded in the critique of injustice. And so when I think about safeguarding and I think there are clear ties here, and I'm curious to know, like, with that in mind, what's the dream that you hold or that you kind of aspire that students will experience in this space?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a really good connection with the work we do. So specifically with the area of safeguarding, my own sort of philosophy and view is that if you're going to safeguard and look after anybody, but in our case with education, it's obviously young people and children, that you need to work, you don't do things for them, you don't do things to them, but you do things with them. And if you're going to work with our young people and children and students to safeguard them, you need to listen to their voice. But listening is a process, not an outcome. And the outcome of the listening process is to understand their lived experiences. So schools quite rightly have sets of rules and regulations young people and children have to follow. So you've got to be on time to class, do your homework, be respectful, all those things, which means a school run as a decent organization. There's not anarchy, otherwise we wouldn't be able to function as a school. But for children, they have a whole set of lived experiences which may or may not be impacted by those rules. So what is their home life like? Are they popular on social media? Have they been bullied? Have they been harassed? Are they experiencing discrimination? And if they are experiencing all of those harms or a variety of those harms, what are they doing differently to keep safe and to live their own life? And we need to understand that before we can help support them and intervene in a meaningful way. Because the real danger that adults will interpret a young person's behavior and get that interpretation wrong, and then they get the intervention wrong as well. And instead of being a source of support and help, they can actually become a hindrance and also can add to the harm and certainly not build trust. Because all of this, it's central to all of this, any effective safeguarding framework, you need to be built on a culture of trust between and very strong, healthy, trustful relationships between the adults responsible for safeguarding the young people and the young people themselves.
There is so much here that is so good. And I think a lot of times are not part of our default thinking as educators, at least not in my default thinking as an educator formerly trained. So I want to highlight a couple of things, and I'll ask a mindset shift question in a moment connected to them. But
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned the with them, like that. I love listening as a process, not an outcome. And I love the idea of, if you don't understand and you don't seek to understand, you're actually probably not helping. You're actually doing the opposite. Like that's fascinating to me. And I think about a lot of times we say things like student voice, but we don't actually mean deeply understanding and seeking to understand and work with in community and partnership. And so I'm curious to know, like, is that a big mindset shift, or how do you kind of like coach educators or folks in the space around that, taking on that mindset? Like, where are they coming from? How do they get to this appreciation of, like, we're doing this with students?
So we have a very specific model that we use to help educators with that. And we have a very clear guiding principle and one rule. So a guiding principle is that we will not understand a young person's life unless we understand the social rules that govern that young person's life. So we seek to understand the social rules that govern that person's life. So why, say, if you take like online life and social media, why do they behave the way they do online? What are the rules that's governing their lives to help keep them safe online? They might take part in an online bullying because they see someone else doing it and they don't want to be the target of that harm, so they will join in with the harmer. But they're doing that not because they agree with the person carrying out the harm. They're doing that because they don't want to be the target themselves. So if you can understand that, then you can have a more effective intervention. And our rule, and this ties in with teaching and learning, is that we seek to understand. And if you understand something, therefore you're learning. So if you go back to what all schools are about, their teaching and learning approaches to teaching and learning, safeguarding in this way is just like teaching and learning in terms of science, math, English, anything else you do in a school. We're looking to learn all the time about the young people we're looking after. And if we learn, then we'll understand. Just having that growth mindset, but tying it back into what makes a good teacher. A good teacher wants to learn, right? So hopefully teachers can make that connection with, well, safeguarding is just the same as me teaching English or math or science, whatever it is, history, whatever it is to teach. And our cyclical model, which comes out of all of that, is that schools provide brave spaces for young people to share information on their terms. So it's when the young person is ready to share, not when we need them to. It's when they're ready to share. And then we seek to understand the information they've shared. Then we work with them to develop the intervention on whatever level that is. So if you have a culture of bullying in grade 7, work with grade 7 to overcome that culture of bullying. So it might not be just working with one kid and one case of bullying. You might have a culture of harassment or a culture of discrimination. So work with the students who are involved in that, work with them to fix it. And then the final part of the cyclical model is that you go back and check to see if that's worked. So what has your intervention been successful? And all the time, in all 4 stages of the model, the cyclical model, you're using the voice of the young person. So you've been really authentic about what you're doing. It's not tokenistic at all. It's saying to young people, you are part of this community, and without your voice, we will not be able to function safely. And in every aspect of the process of supporting them.
Oh, that's such a great process. And I love that it's cyclical, right? Because you're constantly doing.
That's perpetual. It's always in motion.
Yep.
It's
Amazing.
not linear. There's no start and end, because a school is an organic community. It's always growing and developing. That's why schools are great places to work. They change all the time. You can be in the same place, but in a different school year on year, because the new set of kids, new teaching, new issues, new curriculum, everything changes all the time. So they're organic and they're constantly growing. That's why your process needs to be constant.
Makes so much sense. I also love how you reference a lot of Lundy. I mean, indirectly, I feel like here.
Yeah, sure. Well, Lundy's a big influence on the work we do, for sure.
Yeah. Do you mind speaking to that just a little bit
Yeah,
for people
absolutely.
who
Yeah.
might be unfamiliar?
Yeah. So going back to your your earlier question about how you support teachers, actually supporting your community with empowering the voice of the student. Laura Lundy's work is, I was lucky enough to talk with her and meet with her a few times and read her work, obviously. And her model is very, it's very straightforward. It's very straightforward, very easy to understand, but gives a clear pathway for institutions to develop a culture of student voice. And her big thing is participation. So it's rather than student voice, it's student participation in how you can involve young people in the community and view a school as a community and more than just a school. Because I think all schools would recognize that you are a community of learners. And Lundy's model really gives you a really nice framework in which you can do that and guide you in how you can do that and assess that and put that in place. Another good model, which you may be familiar with, is Hart's ladder of participation. So Hart's ladder is really great. So I don't see the ladder as hierarchical, but where Hart's ladder is really useful is you can look at the issues you might be facing. So young people shed information, and we often go back to Hart's ladder and pick the rung on the ladder that we think will match the issue that we're facing. So that's a really nice guide to deal with issues sort of case by case. Hart's ladder can give you that guidance we feel on specific issues and cases.
I love the use of Hart's ladder as just kind of something you can pick a rung of as opposed to a hierarchy. That's really wise. I like that a lot. Very cool.
Yeah.
And so I think you've done a lot of things with the student voice, with different things in terms of what does it look like when we put some of the big ideas that you've talked about into practice? Like how do we literally do it? Could
Yeah.
you talk through a little bit about
Yeah,
what
sure.
schools can do to make this a possibility in their communities?
So let me give you a case study we're working on right now at my school. So we give our tool, we provide the young people and children in our school with a map of their school, a map of the community, a generic map of a home, which matches the socioeconomic background of the young people, and a discrimination reporting tool. So they can share information on any of their lived experiences, school, in the community in which they live, at home, and in relation to any forms of discrimination. And so we've been running that since 2018 as a tool which the kids can use. And over the last couple of years, we've really picked up on a pattern of because when you get the context of where harm happens, you can understand patterns, right? So you'll deal with an individual case, but when you get a series of cases which have a similar context, then you have the ability to change the context to prevent future harm. And that's the really exciting stuff for us. So the case study we're working through right now is that we've seen a pattern of we call it child-on-child relationship harm. So issues of bullying, sexual harassment, and discrimination. The common theme is it takes place away from adult supervision. It takes place amongst groups of students, and it can take place online and in person. And it's very rarely one-on-one. It's very often in group situations. So what we've started to introduce is an active bystander program for our whole community. So to disrupt the context, because adults aren't there, we need to empower young people to deal with it there and then, but they need the skill set to do it safely and the confidence to do it safely. But research has also shown that if you can have a successful active bystander program, it can really reduce instances of harassment, discrimination, and bullying. So we spent the second half of the last school year, and we'll really strengthen it going into the first semester of the coming school year, and training our community to be active bystanders. And so they will have a skill set to disrupt the context of child-on-child relationship harm as it happens. And then we'll track the data to see, and we'll go back to our young people and say, has this approach worked? Have we managed to support you in managing those relationship harm issues that you've shared with us that you experience? In other words, have we changed the context to prevent future harm? So if we go back to that model, we've got the information through the Brave space. We think we understand the issue. We've developed our intervention and provided training, and now we're halfway between the training piece and checking if we've been successful.
Hi, this is Leah popping in to share the freebie today, which is a page of case studies provided by our guest. You can find it at the blog post for this episode at www.lindsaybethlyons.com/189. Now back to the episode.
Wow, that is so good. And I'm thinking about my default response, just the way that I have been experiencing schools and thinking about how people usually intervene in something like that was, oh, we just add adults so that students are never alone, right? We just add adult supervision.
Yeah.
Like, that's not it. We have to empower the students and support the students
Yeah.
to be able to do it themselves. That's so good.
But I think in this particular case, that because the type of harm happens away from adult supervision, that solution seemed the right one for us. In different contexts with different issues, adults may be part of the solution. We work, one of the schools that I work with, they have a McDonald's restaurant on the corner of the street opposite the school. So they provide, and there's harm happening in that restaurant with the kids pouring out of school going into the restaurant. So they provided training to the McDonald's staff and safeguarding. So they then report back to the school if any harms happened. So it's working out, understanding where the context of where the harm happens, then developing your intervention from there. So because you then have community safeguarding, your community gets involved and that strengthens your culture. Because you're saying it's not just the teachers, it's our community. It takes a village to raise a child, it takes a town to change a generation.
That is brilliant. Okay, I love this idea of training community members and truly partnering. We talk a lot about being connected to community and stuff, but that's legitimately connected to the community. You are on the same page there. I love that. And I'm wondering about, folks who are doing this work or who maybe are at an earlier stage of that cycle, maybe they're just starting to get information and have never been through that cycle of partnering with students to determine the action step. Like, are there challenges to this work that you've seen?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. You have to be, you have to want to do it authentically. So if you pay lip service or tokenistic, it will not work and kids will see through you straight away. And that can actually damage your culture. So you have to be genuine about it and be prepared to listen and maybe listen to things you don't want to hear because kids will tell you but then also you have to be prepared to act on what they've said. It's almost better not to ask if you don't act on what they've said. Because you've asked the question and you've done nothing, that's almost that's really negative. That's the road you shouldn't go down, I'd suggest. Yeah, so you need to be authentic about it, and be prepared to listen and be prepared to be surprised, right? So there's things the kids will tell you. We always ask kids what's going well as well. That's really important. And so we were shocked by what they thought was going well. And there was good stuff, but we just took it for granted. But it meant so much to them. So those little things, you can make a really big difference in a school community's life by just doing the little things, understanding them, and doing more of them. So asking the good stuff as well as what's not going so well is really important as well.
I'm curious, just to infuse listeners with a bit of joy. What are some of the things that people said were?
One of the things we learned was this is crazy. So we have a really lovely art department at our school, and at recess and at lunch times, they stay open, and we'll have some light supervision. They'll be there, but in the background, and they do some art materials out so the kids can go and hang out and do a bit of art if the weather's not nice outside and stuff like that. The kids loved that. And we thought that was okay. So okay, but they just that was the best thing in their day, where they could do art together, hang out. You knew there's a teacher there, but they could just do art, chat, talk, and they just loved that. We never knew that. We never appreciated that. We never came close to understanding that. And so we just said, right, we'll do more of that. And just a simple thing like that, which doesn't mean much to us, but meant the world to those kids.
Yeah, it's just, I think that story is so emblematic of why it is so important to just ask the question of the students, to just listen to what they have to say, because they teach us so much more than what you were mentioning earlier, the false interpretation.
Yeah, for sure. Kids are my best teacher. No doubt about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So now I'm envisioning someone listening who is really excited about this idea, but might not be certain about how to get started, or maybe seeing there's like a statutory element to being in the UK, and there's like this kind of community support or expectation of this,
Yeah.
whereas it might not exist as much in the US. Like, what is kind of the very first thing you would encourage someone to do to get started and get the ball rolling here? Or more than one thing, if you think it's more than
Yeah,
one.
sure. So I think that the first, it sounds like a really obvious question, but just work with your school and your school leaders and say, why do we want to do this? What's the purpose of this? And link it back to your mission and your school values. So it becomes part of your mission, becomes part of your strategy, becomes part of your school. But if you can identify the clear, and everyone thinks, yes, student voice, you should listen to kids, that's obvious. Well, sit down and unpack what that actually means and how that can benefit your community. So if you recognize that you have relationship issues, if you have issues of bullying, substance misuse, all the stuff that kids experience, like the risk this we know they go through. If you want to understand that, then student voice is a very good vehicle which gives you that level of understanding. And once you make that almost a philosophical, strategic commitment, then the rest can take care of itself. You can look at my tool, the student voice tool. You can look at Lundy's model for participation, Hart's ladder. You can work out what it is that you do. A lot of schools do surveys, and there's a place for surveys, but they're point in time, right? And kids' lives move on very quickly, and the influence of their lives move on very quickly. So it's what's going to be your means for young people to be able to use their voice, and what's the vehicles in which they can use their voice in your setting, and how can you develop that? And work with the young people to develop it as well. Because that, if you can work with them to develop your student voice, they will see that you are serious about it, and they will feel you're authentic about it. So once you've got your systems and processes set up and your approach set up, they will buy into it and they will work with you on it.
I am reflecting on how powerful the idea of that, almost, I don't want to use the term buy-in, but like buy-in from the teacher level, right? Like the commitment or the authentic, you were saying authenticity, right? Like
Yeah.
of the teachers. And so I'm wondering about a leader who has a staff that's kind of mixed. There, like, some people are really excited, want to authentically partner with students, and some folks are like, I am not really ready to hear the hard things. Like, I'm ready to listen, but only to maybe some things, and I'm not really prepared to hear the full truth that students are speaking, or maybe to follow up on that. How would you advise a leader to kind of negotiate that dynamic in their staff?
Yeah, I think that's a fairly common reaction to a lot of initiatives in schools, and you start with your champions. So start with the people who back that, and start with the people who want to buy in with you, and maybe start with your juniors and seniors. Start with a couple of grades, work with them, get your early victories, right? So when you have an issue come in, deal with it really well and feedback. So with all the student voice stuff that comes into our school, an advisory every Thursday, I will feed back to the advisors and advisees and say, this is what we're looking at this week. This is what's come in. This is what we're doing. Have a discussion about that. Talk about it. So you're just really transparent. Get the elephant out the room as far as possible without breaching confidentiality. But I'll be straight. So if we have an issue of a culture of, say, misogyny or sexual harassment, we'll say, in these grades, this is what's coming through, guys. What do we think we need to do about that? So it's all out in the open. You discuss it, you talk about it, and then you start to develop as a community. So those teachers that may not be buying into it can start to see, right, okay, this is what's happening in the place where I work. Do I want to work at a place that has that? No, maybe I don't. How can we fix that? How can we do something about that? So you bring people slowly along, but start with your champions, start with the people that buy into it, and give yourself the gift of time, and plan it, develop your action plan, your strategic plan, and review that constantly, and look for your indicators of success and your timelines, and just keep reviewing that as you go along.
I love that your tool and the idea of constantly having that information, that input from students of here's what's going on, here's my lived experience, gives you the opportunity to share the information regularly to say, I think it was Mesereau who says, like, you need a disorienting dilemma when we're trying to lead change, right? We have this, whoa, I thought I was living in this community and working in this community where everything was peaceful, right? And then I just remember in one of my classes, I used to teach feminism to high school students. And one of the boys was like, yeah, but like sexism doesn't really happen here. And then all of the girls were like, here, let me tell you about these.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's true. But also, like we're talking about the harms kids experience. They will tell you, I get too much homework for my AP classes. I don't like pizza on a Friday. You get everything. So we talk about everything, right? And soon we've had to work hard this, but we've got kids moving from complaining to advocacy and starting to appreciate the difference. Because we will kick back and say, stop complaining. It's a privileged environment. The pizza is great on a Thursday. So you get them to, but it's also a really good social media tool as well. So we will get kids who will say things that they shouldn't say, or well, not what they shouldn't say, they express themselves inappropriately, right? So you can hold them to account safely for that. It's a safe form of social media as well. So they'll learn how to use their voice. So when they go onto platforms and go into the real world, hopefully they don't get in trouble with their employer because they've had the support from us on how to use their voice correctly. So there's lots of educational benefits as well as all the safety pieces we've talked about as well.
I love that so much when we think about student voice, as often people will, describe student voice or leadership building in youth as like this future benefit, but it's like both, right? It's the future benefit and it's because you're doing it now, you're enabling students to have that voice and participation in the moment they're in school, and it benefits the later because they did it authentically when they were there. So good.
And that's a big part of our vision with this work, is that if you can teach kids to use their voice appropriately and see that action is taken when they do, then hopefully they can take that learning into the society they live in and the community they live in. So they can be a positive contributing member of the community they go on to live. So the really important, we feel, obviously we're biased, but really important educational value in the work we're doing as well.
That's amazing. And oh my gosh, there's been so much. I think listeners are going to get a ton out of this episode. As we move to close, I asked one question just for fun. This can be related to our conversation and your work, or it could be something totally random. But because everyone that listens and tunes in really is a lifelong learner, I'm curious to know what's something that you have been personally learning about lately.
Wow. Like I say, I love to learn. There's so much that's going on right now. So we're just going through a general election in the UK. So what I've been really learning about is our political system and what democracy means, what that looks like. Again, how people can use their voice. Is democracy simple? Is it straightforward? How that can be abused, and does the real picture come back out? How do you get clear information, clear understanding, and how people may abuse or use that system? And is democracy a resilient enough process to provide the freedoms that we all enjoy? So that's what I'm really been thinking and reading about and reflecting on right now.
Right there with you. The United States is in a similar
position. We're in kind of similar positions
absolutely
right now. Interesting times.
Oh yeah. And what powerful times to learn alongside students. I always think about students,
true.
Like you said, students teach us so much. Students are going to teach us how to like get through this, because the same old way is not working. So it's like, give us something new. Let's go.
Yeah, that's right. I'm on board with you with that one for sure.
And the last question I have for you is really, I think people are going to be very interested in the tool you have. I have not heard of anything like this. And I work with different survey organizations and people who do the point in time, but not the ongoing system. So how do folks connect with you, learn more about the student voice, all of those things? Yeah,
sure. So just jump onto our website, thestudentvoice.co.uk. You see all of our stuff there, and you can sign up for demos. We've got lots of our case study page. We have lots of live videos about things, how our schools have used it. We've got tons of blogs about the work that we do. We're very accessible. We do lots of video work, lots of online work with people around the world talking about it. So go to our website, check us out, have a look, and then get in touch through the website. We'll happily talk to you and share all that information. We're really optimistic and transparent about what we do.
Excellent. I will link to the page and also the case study page. So I think people will get a really a nice vibe of what you do and what is possible for their communities by looking at that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great.
Jason, thank you so much for this conversation today. It was such a pleasure.
Yeah, Lindsay, it's been great talking to you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been really kind of you. Thank you.
If you like this episode, I bet you'll be just as jazzed as I am about my coaching program for increasing student-led discussions in your school. Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan talk about a pedagogy of student voice in their book, Street Data. They say students should be talking for 75% of class time. Do students in your school talk for 75% of each class period? I would love for you to walk into any classroom in your community and see this in action. If you're smiling to yourself as you listen right now, grab 20 minutes on my calendar to brainstorm how I can help you make this big dream a reality. I'll help you build a comprehensive plan from full-day trainings and discussion protocols like Circle and Socratic Seminar to follow-up classroom visits where I can plan, witness, and debrief discussion-based lessons with your teachers. Sign up for a nerdy, no-strings-attached brainstorm call at lindsaybethlyons.com/contact. Until next time, leaders, think big, act brave, and be your best self.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at teachbetter.com/podcasts, and we'll see you at the next episode.